True transformation does not begin with sweet words or empty promises of self-improvement. It begins in collapse. In that moment when everything you believed yourself to be disintegrates. In the exact moment when the structure of the self fractures and silence appears. That uncomfortable abyss is the doorway spiritual alchemy has guarded for centuries. It is not magic. It is not a New Age ritual. It is the ancient, forgotten, and fierce practice of looking at yourself without disguise. Spiritual alchemy is not an elegant idea. It is a slow mutilation of the ego. It is the voluntary dismantling of the lies that sustain you. Because no one told you that the first thing to be destroyed in this process is your comfort. The beginning is not light. It is putrefaction. Nigredo, they called it. The black work. The symbolic death of everything that keeps you domesticated. It is not about seeking inner peace. It is about breaking the character, the one you built to survive in a system that rewards obedience and punishes clarity. Nigredo is not a temporary state. It is conscious demolition. There, in the middle of chaos, alchemy shows its real face, a brutal tool to destroy what is false. It does not invite you to imagine. It forces you to feel, to descend into the mud, to look at the cracks, right where fear lives, where anxiety hides, where existential exhaustion crouches, where the soul has been replaced by performance, productivity, and social approval. That is the lead you must melt. But no one warns you that, in doing so, you will lose everything. And it is not about objects or people. It is about roles, about masks, about that small self that clings to the idea of control. The system wants you functional, useful, docile. Spiritual alchemy wants you free. But freedom is not comfortable or decorative. It is a force that burns and tears, that strips you even of your deepest certainties. The great work begins there, in the collapse. After the collapse comes stillness. Not because everything is resolved, but because there is nothing left to hold up. Albedo emerges from that ruin as an uncomfortable clarity. The white work is not peace, it is inner reconstruction. It is the process of washing what remains. The spirit begins to detach itself from mental filth, from recycled emotionality. But it does not do so out of inspiration. It does so out of exhaustion, out of not wanting to keep repeating. That is where the real work begins, not in external change, but in invisible purification. Albedo does not demand perfection. It demands honesty, the cold observation of everything you destroyed to get there. It is not emotional cleansing from aesthetics. It is purging from discomfort. The mind begins to quiet itself, not because it found answers, but because it can no longer bear the noise. Then the silence begins, and in that silence, for the first time, the undistorted reflection appears, not the one you show the world, but the one that hides beneath conditioning. Spiritual practice stops being a trend when it forces you to face your inner trash. It is useless to talk about self-love if you are unwilling to look at the resentment you hide. It is useless to read philosophy if you are unwilling to let the character die, the one who quotes phrases he does not embody. Albedo is rawness. It is beginning to recognize when you are repeating patterns and when you are truly transforming. Here, techniques matter little. What matters is the will to be authentic. Breathing becomes different. No longer a biological act, but a signal of presence. Walking becomes a ritual. Eating becomes a conscious decision. Every gesture becomes loaded with intention. Not because you're trying to be spiritual, but because you can no longer tolerate living on autopilot. Everything begins to filter through a new form of consciousness. Not the one that idealizes, the one that cleans. The one that identifies density without drama and releases it without guilt. Albedo gives way to Citronitis. And at this point, you are no longer the same. Not because you have changed, but because something within you has awakened and cannot go back to sleep. You begin to link pieces together. The mental with the physical, the emotional with the spiritual, the inside with the outside. You begin to see that the system did not only oppress you from the outside, you were also carrying it inside, in the form of guilt, shame, duty, addiction to approval. Now you see it clearly. Citronitis is not enlightenment, it is integration, not an elevated state, but a conscious descent. Here you understand that there is nothing to achieve, only to stop dividing yourself. Intuition begins to take the place previously occupied by noise, and this intuition is not fantasy. It is the result of having broken enough to distinguish between what is real and what is learned. You begin to trust your perception, not because it is perfect, but because, for the first time, it is yours. You no longer want to understand more theories. Now what matters is living what you know. Every choice becomes alchemy if it comes from consciousness. Eating, speaking, listening, creating, working, touching, everything becomes an opportunity to reaffirm that new internal state that no longer depends on external structures. Now you know yourself as in process, not as a finished product, and that consciousness becomes your new foundation. Even if no one sees it, even if you cannot explain it, rubedo is not glory. It is nakedness. It is the point where the search ends, not because you found something, but because you stopped searching. There are no fireworks, no sudden enlightenment, only truth remains. You, without filters. Spiritual alchemy does not make you superior. It reminds you of what you always were before conditioning, before fear, before the mandate to perform and please. Rubedo is the crystallization of being when you no longer need validation from the system. You are no longer waiting for signs from the universe. You became your own message. The light you seek is no longer somewhere else, or sometime else. It is in every act you perform from clarity. Spirituality stops being a discourse and becomes presence in the world. Everything becomes simple, not because life is easier, but because you no longer resist its rawness. You have stopped running. The body is no longer an enemy. Emotion is no longer a threat. The mind is no longer a prison. Everything has been reconfigured, not by divine intervention, but by internal work, constant, painful, real. Now you can inhabit yourself without needing to explain who you are. External judgment loses its power. The need to belong dissolves. You have crossed each layer of programming until reaching your most radical truth. That freedom is not bought or negotiated. It is conquered within. Rubedo is not the end. It is the birth of a new way of being, one in which every gesture, every word, every decision, carries the seal of a clean consciousness, not perfect, but alive. You have integrated your shadow. You have turned your wound into a sacred place. You are no longer divided between what you feel and what you show. You no longer need to adapt. Now you can offer what you are, without performing it. Service is no longer sacrifice. It is a natural consequence of having recovered yourself. That is where the real begins. Not the enlightenment of escaping the world, but the embodiment of what you have learned. Creating, bonding, building, destroying, everything becomes part of a single alchemy, living without betraying yourself. That is what the system does not want you to remember, that you are the fire, that you are the gold. If something inside you shifted, this video served its purpose. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, comment which part struck you most, and activate the bell. There is much more content that will help you awaken and reconnect.